Hello and welcome aboard the Gallant Says podcast. It is Sunday, October 20th, 2024. Earlier today, the Green Bay Packers took down the Houston Texans 24-22, dropping them to 5-2 on the year. We're going to talk about a couple of different things in this game. First, I'm a little concerned about the coaching as far as how it might hold this team back and their ability to be one of the best teams in the league. Two, there's another problem with this team. I don't know if they can fix it by the end of the year. And we'll also hear from you. You can join in on this show live on YouTube at Paul Gallant, Twitch at Gallant Says, Twitter at Gallant Says, on Instagram at Sports Gallant, or Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. Hit it!
A radio show host in Seattle called Paul Gallant.
You are definitely living in the hindsight world today, Paul.
Do you feel there's been a consistent theme with the interceptions?
I think every interception really has a different story.
I was just kind of curious what Paul gets to see.
Grow up, mother. Are you kidding me?
Paul Gallant, what the hell is wrong with you?
You know, I really wanted to start the show off by just jamming this all day, talking about a 6-1 team. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to play that song over and over and over again and just annoy the shit out of everybody. But this is a game where I feel like the Houston Texans were thoroughly outcoached, and this is not the first time that I've said this. And usually it's been due to their offensive coordinator, Bobby Slowick. But this time I think it was more than just Bobby Slowick. We're over a third of the way through this year. And at this point, ask this question to yourself and answer it honestly, because we all like DeMeco Ryans. He played for this team. He seems very likable. But at what point are we going to look at some of the issues that this team seems to have on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis, and at the very least point the finger and say, hey, he's got to be better here? I saw this tweet. It's from someone who works at one of our competitors, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. If you listen to me, I do a show with Joe George, noon to 3, every single weekday there. This is Ron Hughley, who is a nice guy. I don't know him very well. We've interacted a couple of times. But I saw this tweet. I know this was a tough loss by the Houston Texans, but for them to be as shorthanded as they were, and they were shorthanded, and Stroud to struggle the way he did, they found a way to stay in the game. I feel better about the Texans today. That DeMeco culture is real. And sure, there is a new vibe with this team with DeMeco Ryans as the head coach. But this is one of the most penalized teams in the league. And I felt like there were a lot of game management mistakes that happened today that if you were a Madden player, you wouldn't have made those mistakes. So let's just start off early in this game. Texans are trying to stop the Packers from going into the end zone. There's a play where they might have taken the football away. Hey, maybe DeMeco Ryans should throw a red challenge flag out there. All I know is that through all the confusion of a call that could have been challenged, I see DeMeco Ryans jumping up and down, up and down, up and down before a play that ultimately ends up with D'Angelo Ross getting cooked by, I want to say, was it Watkins on that play? I forget. The Packers have a lot of good wide receivers. Honestly, that might not even be a real name. Whatever the case. He should have called a timeout or thrown a challenge flag. He didn't do either of them. That's on the head coach. He's the one that's got to make that happen there. And it's little things like that where I feel like we've been hesitant to jump on DeMeco Ryans because we all like him. But that's something that the head coach has to be on top of. Then we've got whatever the hell happened at the very end of the game. Remember that field goal drive that the Texans had to take the lead? So they're close to the goal line. And the first couple of plays after getting in field goal range, well within field goal range, they run the ball, they lose 2 yards. They run the ball again, they lose 3 yards. And then they decide to throw the football. But the play that they throw, it's an out route? It's well short of the first down. It would have gone out of bounds. It would have stopped the clock. It didn't feel like they really had a plan in that situation. So I'm having a hard time with this one. Just this DeMeco Ryans love, because I feel like we're not being as critical as we need to with him. And I felt like in those two spots, that's kind of where the Texans lost the game, right? I mean, I don't know if they're going to stop the Packers from scoring a touchdown on that drive, but I do know at the end, there was no plan there. And if you want to, I guess, get a little bit of the explanation as to why the Texans did this, here's after the game. Here's DeMeco Ryans being asked about that. This is on the Texans live stream on their YouTube channel. Here is DeMeco.
Every time we step out is opportunity to learn, opportunity to grow, right? We had opportunities here to finish this game. We had our hands on 2 balls there at the end, like ball was tipped up. We come down and make a play there. It's a completely different feeling right now. But you go back, you learn from it. We see the mistakes, win or loss, we always learn from it.
Do they always learn from it? I hate to ask it like that, but it feels like a lot of the mistakes that happen, specifically the penalties, they happen so often. And while they've gotten better with the penalties the last couple of weeks, I don't know that they necessarily get better from it. The offensive line sure as hell didn't, as Ultimate Fan points out on our Instagram at Sports Gallant. CJ was running for his life the whole game, and CJ didn't have time on that third down to make a throw to potentially the end zone that would have made things a little bit better. But here's more DeMeco Ryans. This is Ryans getting asked about the sequence at the very end. Here's the head coach of the Houston Texans.
Yeah, we thought we had a completion there to Tank. He was open, just a little tight on the sideline, so thought we had a good completion.
More on that. What was the thinking on the play calling? Was it to run the clock out and then go for the field goal?
Yeah, our goal is always to go score. That's our goal. Like, they did a good job of stopping us, didn't get in. So, obviously we didn't pass the ball well all day, right? So it wasn't good all the way around. We ran the ball well. Thought Joe did a good job of running the ball. And, we needed to pass it. It was not good enough, starting with the protection. If we can't protect, and that's going to be difficult for the quarterback to make the plays.
Okay, so he's right. They couldn't throw the ball all game, and we'll get to Bobby Slowick in a bit. But you ran the ball on first down, you lose yards. You ran the ball on second down, you lose yards. The clock was running at the very least. Why not run the ball again on third down? If you can't throw it, you got to be looking at this from the perspective of, hey, we want the Packers to burn timeouts. We want them to have minimal time. If we're only going to get a field goal out of this situation, we got to make sure that it's going to be as difficult as possible for them to march down the field and potentially get a game-winning field goal. So it really just felt like after it got into that third and long situation, they didn't have a plan. They didn't stick to a plan. Hey, let's actually go for the end zone. 3rd and 15? With the way that you were passing the ball? I don't know. I mean, there's got to be communication between DeMeco Ryans and Bobby Slowick, and it can't just be Bobby Slowick that's the one making all these decisions. It's one of those things, you go back to the Super Bowl that took place in Houston where the Patriots come back against the Atlanta Falcons, and a lot of people blame Kyle Shanahan for that Super Bowl loss, but I mean, Dan Quinn was the head coach of that team. Dan Quinn never called Kyle Shanahan off, and there was a situation where all the Falcons had to do after that amazing Julio Jones catch was just stay in field goal range, get a field goal, the game's done. They got aggressive. Next thing you know, because they're aggressive, there's a holding call, there's a sack, they're out of field goal range. So, we're going to get to Bobby Slowick, but I feel like DeMeco Ryans certainly has a role in this loss because I felt like the Texans' game management was not as good as it needs to be. And you heard from him earlier saying it's a learning process. And sure, it is a learning process, but it feels like the Texans are very slow learners. The same mistakes happen over and over again. They're not getting better from them. So, those are some mistakes on DeMeco's end. Hey, to Ron's point, they do deserve credit for being banged up, coming into this game, showing up, playing well. But if not for a couple of mistakes by the Packers that the Texans were able to take advantage of, this could have been a lot like the Vikings game. And I'm happy that they beat the Bills, but how is this team routinely in the second half of games so bad? It feels like the second half is where we always see this team sputter. And while I think that the idea of second half adjustments is a bit overrated, why is it the second half for this team where things always seem to hit the fan? And doesn't that fall at the feet of the head coach? So this loss is not all on DeMeco Ryans, but it does feel, just based off of the conversations that I'm seeing taking place online after this game, that he's not getting the same blame that Bobby Slowick is and that the offensive line are getting. And while both of those guys, both of those units, offensive line as a unit, the Bobby Slowick play calling, whatever the hell's going on as far as trying to make a passing offense happen, it's just not working. DeMeco is a part of this too. And look, they're 5-2. Season is not over. I don't want anyone to think that I'm panicking or anything like that. I just feel like DeMeco's got to get better in game management situations because I think if he handled things differently, and specifically those two spots, calling a timeout or throwing a challenge flag before that touchdown pass, or having just a strong plan in that red zone situation that led to a field goal and not a touchdown, we might be talking about a 6-1 team. We might be talking about a win, and we might be talking about a really improbable one where CJ Stroud throws for less than 100 yards and they still somehow figure out a way to win. But there are other mistakes, and the Texans definitely, I think for some, are still in that, I don't think they're ready group of NFL teams. I don't know if they're ready for the Chiefs. Well, I don't know if they're ready for the Lions, who we saw today. I don't know if they're ready for the Ravens. Because, hey, the sack that took him out of field goal range in the first half, was it Dalton Schultz who was supposed to have it? I don't know, but there was a free blitzer off the edge. The sack takes him out of 50-plus yard range for Kaimi Fairbairn, who had another 50-plus yarder today. Tank Dell has a touchdown pass, hit him right in the fucking hands. Got to catch that. And it's a shame because there were some guys who came in there and stepped up. I thought Neville Hewitt had a really good game. He gets the interception early. He has a deflection late, almost gets that one. Honestly, he gets that interception, game's over. Eric Murray, balls off his hands as well at the very end. It's little things like that that seem to not go the Texans' way week in, week out. And I think that's what's keeping them from being in that top stratosphere of NFL teams. And it's why a lot of the people that aren't the biggest, I guess, believers in this franchise, I think it's why a lot of them are still holding out. Let's read some comments here on YouTube at Paul Gallant, on Instagram at Sports Gallant, Ultimate Fan. What's up, buddy? I think you're jumping the gun on DeMeco. This is not me saying DeMeco is a bad coach. It's not. It's just saying there's some things that need to be cleaned up, and I feel like we don't talk about DeMeco needing to clean those up as well. Game management is a huge thing, and there's a lot of coaches in the league that are not very good at it. And this is not me saying DeMeco's bad at it. It's just saying that these two issues were issues today, and I'm very curious as to how many people are going to talk about them going forward, because everyone's going to talk about Bobby Slowick. Bobby Slowick's low-hanging fruit right now. Are people going to do that with DeMeco? I just don't think they are. Let's read some more comments here. A lot of people are going after Bobby Slowick on my YouTube comments. Nick says Bobby Slowick equals Bill O'Brien 2.0. Rick the Ruler, Slowick, and the O-line not living up to the hype. The offensive line is $188 million in total contracts for all those starters. Berserk says DeMeco in the conservative mindset football with weak run plays that don't get game. I mean, to DeMeco's credit, he is actually, I think, very aggressive in fourth down situations. This was one of those games where I don't know what you do offensively, but they had to have a strong plan going into that late situation. You know, you had them on the ropes, at least from a clock perspective, and that last play on 3rd and 15, it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And I want to hear how you guys feel watching and listening to CJ Stroud talking about that last sequence right before the Packers get the ball back, drive down the field, and kick that field goal. Here's CJ Stroud being asked about whatever their plan was down the stretch.
I just try to execute every play that I can, that I get called. I really don't know the philosophy right then and there. I'm trying to talk to DeMeco, but I really can't get over there. But what it seemed like we were trying to just run out the clock and then, try to kick a field goal before, we ended up, having to throw the ball on 3rd down and, they'll give them the ball back with a minute and like 40 left. So, I think that it was a good plan. Just got to execute better.
It's so funny watching him say that, and I guess he apologized to some media members for the way that he answered some of the questions in the press conference afterwards, but everything he says up to the very end makes you think that this was not a good plan for the Texans in that red zone situation with the ability to score a touchdown that's going to make it a lot more difficult for the Packers to march down the field and potentially win it. It would have made it they have to score a touchdown as opposed to kicking a field goal. And listening to him there, it feels like he's trying to avoid the question. And then at the end, he says it was a good plan. I don't think he believed that was a good plan based off of his tone, based off of his body language. And clearly he's upset after a loss. The loss is fresh on his mind, and maybe that's why he answered it that way. But hearing CJ Stroud in that moment right there, I hear a guy who wasn't thrilled with the way that things went down. And not just because they weren't able to score a touchdown. You heard him say it there. I can't talk with DeMeco right there. In that moment, there should have been more communication about what the Texans were actually trying to accomplish there. Because if they knew they couldn't throw the football in this game and they were having such a difficult time doing it, they've got to come up with something else. So that's my immediate reaction hearing that from CJ Stroud. I'm sure if he gets asked about it, he's going to say something else. But I thought it was noteworthy the way that Stroud answered it. Because I remember reading the transcript. And reading the transcript, I mean, you think, oh, yes, CJ agreed with what they did. But watching him talk about it right there, with how long he takes to eventually say, like, yeah, it was a good plan, we just got to execute better. I don't know. I don't know if he really believes that. Anyway. A lot of mistakes in this game. A lot of almosts. And I do feel like they got out-coached by a Packers team that has a really good defensive coordinator in Jeff Havley, who was the head coach at Boston College and took this defensive coordinator gig. I think he's going to be an NFL head coach fairly soon. He is, he's really good. I mean, what they did, even it can't be all, they don't have Nico Collins. We all think CJ Stroud's really good, and we know the offensive line has issues, but I mean, Joe Mixon was fucking awesome today, He's been really good for 2 weeks. He's been good in 3 of the 4 games that he's played. The Bears game was really the only one where things weren't working out so well for him, and then of course he gets hurt in that game. But if you're the Texans right now, you're 5-2 and you're happy, And I think that you should feel the way that Joe Mixon felt. This is I think a great little quote that he had, courtesy of Will Kunkel, Fox 26.
I mean, shit, it looked like I'm worried. Like, I'm not worried at all, man. I mean, we got, like I said, we got a damn good football team. You know what I'm saying? And at the end of the day, we are our worst enemy. And I think that we just got to go out there, respond. We're going to go out there, learn from the tape tomorrow, and obviously just store it away. We're going to learn from it, and we just got to respond. And I think that we're going to respond in a hell of a way next week. So, obviously, it sucks that we lost. We had opportunity and just came up short, man. Just came up short. That's all that happened.
It's a good mindset to have. And I like hearing that from Mixon after the game. But it does feel like a lot of these things keep happening over and over again. And from a game management perspective, I want DeMeco to actually get better, especially if he's talking about getting better and being accountable. And I really am frustrated with whatever that plan was at the goal line or in the red zone. And on top of that, I'm just very curious about how much better DeMeco's going to be at these game management decisions, which are tough in the moment when you're on the sideline. You got a million things going on by the end of the year. But I think he dropped the ball here. Is he the biggest reason that they lost? No, we haven't gotten to the biggest reason. But this is where I feel like a lot of people are hesitant to criticize him because he's new. He has changed the vibes here. He played here, and he's very likable. And I like him. I think clearly there's a mindset defensively that has taken root because of him. They do fly to the ball. They hit people. But there are other things that need to happen, you know? It's not just about mentality as a coach. I think we've seen this with Dan Campbell in Detroit. Everyone likes him a lot. Everyone wants to play for him, but sometimes the game management decisions are questionable. He's always aggressive. Does he always need to be aggressive? We're trying to hold everybody to the same standard that hype has attached to them. You know, the hype going into this year for the Texans has made us all want a lot out of them. Are they living up to the hype? The people who are nitpicking them, who are like, oh, I'm not that impressed about the win over the Bills. You can point to this game. You can point to the Vikings game and the Bills game and say, it still hasn't happened. We're almost halfway through the year. When is it going to happen? This is a learning opportunity, but are they actually learning if this stuff just continues to happen? Because it did feel like they were outcoached by a team with Jeff Havley as the defensive coordinator of the Packers and with Matt LaFleur as the coach of the Packers too. It felt like there was pretty clear who had the better coaches in this game. In a game of two teams that are in probably the same tier in the NFL right now. Huge win for the Packers. This is not one that you leave with your head down in shame like after the loss to the Vikings. This is one where you're like, we had this. Is this going to cost us down the road? All right, let's keep on going through this. This is also Stephon Diggs talking about the plan on the goal line at the very end, courtesy of Will Kunkel, Fox 26.
So for me, like, I hate to give you the cliche, but, I don't call the plays. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, we went in with the mindset trying to score, I guess. We ran the ball, tried to run the ball efficiently, didn't get too much, and then we kicked the field goal. So for me, like, I don't call the plays. I don't know what we're thinking as a whole, but I just know, like, I'll be trying to do my job.
I mean, Stephon's definitely not co-signing that at all. He did not seem to like it based off of that answer, right? That's Stephon Diggs. That's CJ Stroud. They don't like what happened at the end. Is that just on Bobby Slowick? Is it on DeMeco Ryans? It's on everybody, but there was no plan at the end, and I don't think Stroud or Diggs liked it. Anyway, let's talk about Bobby Slowick. Sorry, burying the lead for a lot. I know a lot of you guys want me to be going after Bobby right away. Talking about quicker plays. That's from Sneakers Most Wanted, not just screens. So the Texans passing offense had just 55 total yards. That's because the 4 sacks for 31 yards subtract from the 86-yard total. Stroud was 10 of 21 on the game for just 86 yards. He was pressured on 50% or more of his dropbacks. I know in the first half at one point it was 57. I think somewhere else I saw it's the most pressure that he's ever faced in a game. And the worst of all, you make the trade for Stephon Diggs this offseason because say one of your receivers gets hurt, like Tank Dell did in the second half of last year. These other receivers are theoretically going to be able to step up and make a difference. But Stephon Diggs was your leading wide receiver. He had 5 catches for 23 yards, and 17 of them came on 1 catch. The other 4 catches were for 6 fucking yards. And you got a guy like Stephon Diggs out there who's so good at getting open quickly. Why aren't you running more passes over the middle of the field? Especially considering the Packers were sending guys so often. And doing it in a way where it seems the Texans can't figure out, but we see it every single week. Watch the film, and you'll notice there's a lot of misdirection and stunts and things that are clearly not the easiest to pick up at first, but when it's happening to you every single week, how are you not getting better at it? Especially when you're paying your offensive line $188 fucking million in total over their contract. This offensive line is getting paid so much. Should stunts be this effective against them? Should blitzes from unconventional areas be this effective against them? It feels like at times there are just completely free rushes on CJ Stroud, who is good at extending plays, who is good at escaping the rush. How are they not improving on that area? Is that Bobby Slowick? Is that whoever the Texans offensive line coach is? Is that DeMeco Ryans? They've got to be seeing this on tape. It's so fucking obvious that this works. If you're at any team, specifically Jeff Havley, the Packers defensive coordinator, and you're seeing this, you're licking your chops. This is so easy. Stroud's always running for his life. How the fuck is he going to throw the football downfield? And Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator, doesn't really feel like he's adjusting. The passing game completely inept, and drops are happening too. Tank Dell dropped that touchdown pass. Tank Dell this year, massive disappointment. Against the Colts, 3 catches for 40 yards. Bears, 1 catch for -3. Vikings, 5 catch for 62 yards. I would imagine most of those came in garbage time, those yards. Bills, 4 catches, 38. Patriots game, 7 catches for 57 and a touchdown. Oh, we felt like, hey, without Nico Collins, he's finally going to get his. 0 catches today. And he had chances. How is Bobby Slowick not making this happen? We know Dell's talented, right? Like, watch last year. And last year, I didn't understand how they couldn't make Dameon Pierce work. Everyone was looking at Pierce and acting like he wasn't talented. Pierce has a lot of talent, and maybe he couldn't quite fit what Bobby Slowick's trying to do, but the Texans' offense today was give it to Joe Mixon and hope that he fucking figures it out. And he did great today. He's awesome. Really, I was a little concerned with that contract that they gave him, especially after the injury keeps him out a couple of games. 25 carries, 115 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I wish he got 40 carries today. He's the only thing that was working for this Texans offense. And I guess I'll give the offensive line a little bit of credit because at least on the ground they were opening up holes. It looked a lot better, honestly, than it looked against New England, where really just the 2 Mixon and Pierce runs for 50+ are the reason that they were able to run for 200+. But, I mean, that's what the Texans offense is with Bobby Slowick right now. And everyone's seeing it. Everyone outside of Houston is seeing it with Bobby Slowick. And I don't know if they're going to actually move on from him after the year, but it is not like the Matt LaFleur offense. Same coaching tree. It's not like the Kyle Shanahan offense. Everything is not smooth. And it could be as simple as the offensive line. And I know DeMeco Ryans, I think at halftime, had called out his offensive line for not playing physical enough. Yeah, that's for sure. I saw somebody, I think it was John Hickman on Texans Twitter, who posted a video showing how after CJ Stroud goes out of bounds and guys are getting chippy with him and shoving him, none of his offensive line go over there. So they're getting paid $188 million. They're not doing great in pass protection. And on top of that, they're not even going to, I mean, don't they like hitting people? Don't they like hurting people? If you're a big guy, you're an offensive lineman. Don't you want to fuck people up? I would. I know that's why I played football. Small guy like myself. Yes, I know. I wanted to hurt people. Does that make me a bad person? Maybe. Does it make me toxically masculine? Maybe. I don't care. If you're an offensive lineman, you're getting paid a lot of money. You're a huge guy. Don't you want to shove people around? And if somebody's going after your quarterback, doesn't that give you an excuse, carte blanche, essentially, to go fuck somebody up? Where was that? You didn't see that from them today. They couldn't pass protect. The same things keep on happening to them, and they have no adjustment for it. At least Joe Mixon had a good day. That's really all I got for the Texans' offensive line. I'm going to read a couple of tweets about Bobby Slowick. This is from John Crumpler from Texans Twitter. Houston's offense is entering fundamentally broken territory despite any CJ Stroud heroics. No real identity with the run game, horrific pass protection issues, and without Nico Collins, they're not threatening on the perimeter. So true. All of that's true. I don't know what they're trying to do on the ground other than, oh, Joe, please figure it out. What is this, high school? It's got to be better than that. And I'm not going to go through the film and study it on the way that some of the people that actually know what they're talking about with football, that have played the game, are going to. But it really just feels like, all right, figure it out, Joe. That is high school shit. Throwing for less than 100 yards in a game when you got a quarterback like CJ Stroud, it's embarrassing. I don't care how good Green Bay's defense is or how good the defensive coordinator is. That was embarrassing today. You still have Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. You have Dalton Schultz. Schultz had a couple of good moments in this game, or at least it felt like at first. Here's a Greg Rosenthal tweet from the NFL Network about Bobby Slowick. Packers versus Texans. One offensive staff has answers and provides advantages for their young quarterback. The other, ... Yeah, what is Bobby Slowick doing for Stroud? Clearly not adjusting in game, clearly not making things better by the end of the game, you know? And that's really frustrating because everyone was crowning him this offseason. You're wondering, like, oh, is Bobby Slowick going to take another job? I saw some real fucking idiots say something along the lines of, like, oh, would you move on from DeMeco Ryans to keep Bobby Slowick around? Like he's some fucking genius. How? Clearly we're not seeing it. Stroud's making everything happen by escaping the rush and doing incredible things. Joe Mixon's doing everything on his own. I don't know how this offense is scoring points. They're definitely not getting better as the game goes on. Second half, they're wretched. How are they going to make this better? How does this get better by the end of the year? People were mad at this tweet earlier in the week by someone named Peter Bukowski. I'll be honest, I don't know who Peter Bukowski is, but Peter Bukowski had a tweet, and it just gave out some numbers. And those numbers are, the Texans' offense with CJ Stroud for his career are 17th in EPA per play. I don't know what EPA means, but it's a measure of offensive efficiency. 26th in success rate. 13th in EPA per dropback. And everyone agrees he's one of the best 5 quarterbacks in the league. So the math isn't mathing. No, it makes sense, though. Everyone who's mad thought this was a criticism of CJ Stroud. Maybe Peter Bukowski was criticizing CJ Stroud with it. He's the co-founder of a Packers podcast and hosts Locked On Packers. But he brings those things up. And I mean, I'm using that as my evidence of why Bobby Slowick is holding CJ Stroud back. Because for somebody who's not watching, you are looking at the numbers and you're like, this doesn't really make any sense. But we're watching, and whether it's the trying to get cute stuff that Bobby Slowick does a couple of times a game, the obsession with screens that seem really easy to blow up, the pass protection struggling so much against stunts, which every team in the league does, right? Like the running game until this week really not making a whole lot of sense either. It is just give Joe Mixon the ball, hope he figures it out. I don't know what you do about Bobby Sloak the rest of the way, but it really feels like he's a liability, and everyone sees it. We see it. We've been seeing it for a while. And I think you're just stuck with him. And if you're just stuck with him, I don't know, what do you do? How does this get better? I don't have the answer. I really don't. So there you go. Shout out to Terry. Galan is trash. There. Said it. Thanks, Bob. Let's read some comments here. You can get after us on YouTube at Paul Gallant, on Twitter at Gallant Says, Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports, on Instagram at Sports Gallant, and on Twitch at Gallant Says. Texas Boss says, I would have been throwing slants all game to stop that linebacker stunt. You would have think it would have helped a little bit. Rappy Ho, I was getting blasted in the offseason for saying I didn't like Bobby. I wasn't sold on him. To say I don't like him, I don't know. Some people are suggesting trade for DeAndre Hopkins. They don't need more wide receivers. They need some help. They need some help on the offensive line. And I feel like probably the biggest issue right now is Kenyon Green. Kenyon Green, I saw this from, I think, at Stroud MVP on Twitter. Kenyon Green is the worst graded interior offensive lineman in all of football by Pro Football Focus. And I don't know who you go to if you're looking for somebody else at left guard. Like, where else are you going to go? You're going to go to Kendrick Green, or you were playing a little bit at fullback last week, or are you going to do the Titus Howard thing again, where you move Titus Howard to guard and you put Blake Fisher in at tackle? I don't know. You're in a very tricky spot right now. And after a loss like this, I don't think you should be pressing the panic button, but I do feel like the limitations and the ceiling of the Texans are very visible. And the only way for them to break it, to beat it, does feel like it's going to involve some sort of change. And I don't know what that change really is. Realistically, who are you bringing in that on the offensive line is going to have a major impact? And from a play calling perspective, or from a coach's perspective, I mean, what are you going to do on that front too? Texans offensive line coach Chris Strausser. There's also Cole Popovich, who, by the way, yes, that is the son of Greg Popovich. Zach Yenzer. You got three coaches, and I don't know. They're very expensive. And they're a liability. And they're fully healthy this year. Last year, everyone was like, oh, next year when they're healthy, it's going to be fine. All right, I don't know now. So there you go. What else do we have here? Joe Mixon, by the way, 400 yards rushing, 5 total touchdowns in 3.5 games for the Texans. I really liked what I saw from Neville Hewitt, from Jake Hansen, from Tim Settle. Like, they did their job, the young players. So this is not like a total loss. This is just one of those games, though, where I can't help but feel like we know how this season is going to end, and it's going to be something that involves a bad game management decision, the offensive line, or Bobby Slowick right now. And hopefully, by the end of the year, these things improve. But for this season, the Texans are 1-2 against big boy teams. And while this loss is not the end of the world, it's certainly disheartening because those issues for this team seem like it's going to be really hard for them to fix them to end them by the end of the year. I did want to talk about how chippy things were before the game. I don't know how many people saw the dust-up between Jair Alexander, who does not shut the fuck up, and Stephon Diggs before the game. Diggs was asked about it afterwards. This is courtesy of Ari Alexander from Channel 2. Here's Stephon Diggs talking about it. You can actually see the video of the back and forth, the brouhaha on the bottom.
I was walking to the locker room in the beginning of the game, and I heard somebody chirping. And I'm never the bigger person, so that's how I go and with by myself or with a million. So I'm never the bigger person. I ain't letting it go. You know, obviously they picked it up or whatever, but I ain't with the football tough guys. It is what it is. You know, I can't all the time. But I ain't getting into all that. It's just I ain't letting it go though. I was walking.
This is an all-time line. I got to play this one more time. This is awesome.
Bigger person, I ain't letting it go. I'm never the bigger person, I ain't letting it go.
I'm never the bigger person. I ain't letting shit go. And this is the same guy who a couple of weeks ago after they beat the Bills said, I'm emotional. Clearly he is very emotional. I love hearing that from Diggs. But it felt like the game was about as chippy as we've seen a Texans game in a while. And I was wondering where it came from. And it might have come from this exchange. Big Sarge got this from Texans defensive tackle Tim Settle, who I thought had a great game today. He had a sack. I think he deflected a pass, too. I know Hewitt deflected a pass. He had the interception. But bringing it back to Settle. Settle had said this about Josh Jacobs leading up to the game. I saw this Friday right after my show was done on ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.
You're a disruptive force. You play very violently when you're on the field. How is it when you go up against a running back like Josh Jacobs who has that same mindset?
You got to tackle him about him. I don't got no problem getting my hands dirty. Yeah, I got no problem. I'm going to try to knock his helmet off. Yeah. That's just on me. I don't care about nothing there. I don't care about where he went. I don't care about what he did. I don't care. I don't.
I liked hearing that. I liked hearing that out of Tim Settle. Now, some people are going to be like, oh, why are you talking shit before the game? He backed it up. Settle backed it up. Settle can leave that game with his head held high. He did what he was supposed to do. Made a couple of plays. Mario Edwards, his absence was not a problem this game. Didn't really see that much of DeMeco Ryans. He was out there. I think it's going to take a little bit of time for him to get going. But Josh Jacobs responded to what Tim Settle had to say. This is from the Packers website. Sarge cut it up for us. Here you go. This is Josh Jacobs, Packers running back, who did have 12 carries for 76 yards today, but the Packers really were throwing the football a lot.
What have you seen from Houston on defense? I know they have a lot of injuries, but what kind of been your impression?
They fly around a lot. Their defensive front good. They got two really good edge rushers. They be up the field fast and things like that. And they tackle pretty well. So it's gonna be an interesting game. I heard some things about how they was talking about they're gonna be physical with me. So we're gonna see. It's gonna be fun.
You want to respond to that?
I don't know his name. I just know it was defensive lineman. So we're gonna see.
I bet Jacobs is pissed that he didn't get to run the football a little bit more because they did have some success running. They just didn't run it that much. Just 12 carries on the game. The Texans defense did do its job for the most part. I mean, they got 2 takeaways via interception. They of course, recovered that muff punt, too. And the Texans, were helped out a little bit by the Packers, who I felt like were sloppy more so than the Texans were forcing these takeaways. But they did do their job. Man, they aren't the reason that the Texans lost this game, I thought that big plays were going to be a huge problem for the Texans, and really the only one I can think of is one where DeMeco Ryans should have called a timeout or thrown the challenge flag. That throw down the left sideline where DeMeco's jumping up and down before the play where he beat D'Angelo Ross. But, for the most part, I thought the Texans did a really good job on defense. But, unfortunately, the passing game looks awful. And I'm seeing a couple of, I think, Packers fans in here. Texans will make it to the playoffs and get dominated by a good defense. The blueprint is out there with the Vikings and Packers. It does feel like right now Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator of this team, is not capable of countering defenses like this. And that is concerning. And I don't know how it gets better, you know? I really don't. Let's read some more comments here. Texas Tags says, Texans have zero identity. Steven De Los Santos says, Chiefs, Ravens, and Lions are going to whoop their ass. Siraj says, Jesus at guard wouldn't help this offensive line. I don't think Jesus would have been a good offensive lineman. I feel like Jesus would have been best as a kicker. I say that because I just feel like he wasn't a big guy, right? I think that's the one position I feel like he'd be good playing. Man, a lot of Packers fans talking shit in these comments. I don't blame them, although it was a close game, but it's one of those close games where it feels like the Texans were lucky to be hanging around. The Packers were giving them opportunity after opportunity, but Texans didn't take advantage of it. And, you know, the offensive line's got to be cleaned up. Bobby Slower's got to be better. And DeMeco Ryans has got to be better in game management situations. Anyway, I'm going to be doing my radio show tomorrow, noon to 3 with Joe George, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. We're on YouTube at ESPN Houston if you want to watch along. Of course, make sure that you're subscribing to my YouTube channel at Paul Gallant. Like this video, subscribe, please. I need to feed my cat. I'm on Twitch if you're more of a Twitch person, at Gallant Says. I'm on Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. Also on Twitter, at Gallant Says, or on Instagram at Sports Gallant. Any of those ways, you can watch the show live on all 5 platforms, and you can get it in podcast form after the fact on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend, etc., etc. Frustrating loss for the Texans. Season's not over, but it does feel like we just saw the way that this season will eventually end. And that kind of sucks. Hopefully I end up being wrong. Anyway, until tomorrow, I think we're going to do another show. Still determining whether or not I'm going to do it after Monday Night Football's done or after my radio show's done. But until tomorrow, at some point on the Gallant Says podcast, so long, farewell.